First, the heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, desperate search for survival for those hundreds of thousands of refugees from Syria. Who knows how many people have died trying to escape Bashar al-Assad's murderous regime in Syria. President Obama is working on letting refugees come to the U.S. I asked Marco Rubio about that call to help. Rubio talks a lot about his Christian faith, and whether that faith makes him feel compelled to help with all this suffering, and how he then balances that with his role as United States Senator.
I think it is part of my job. I do feel that sense. And it goes back to reminding people America already does stuff. The UN, for example, is responsible, or takes a lot of time and money to take care of these refugees around the world. The UN, the United States...
But it takes so long.
Well, but the U.S. is the single biggest funder of the United Nations, so to begin with that. Second of all, every year we admit about 70,000 refugees to begin with. And so we've already been a very generous country, and I think we should continue to be. And I do think I am open to admitting more of these people that are fleeing oppression in that region, and I've said that. I don't want to do it. It's hard because they're coming from a region where there is a lot of radicalism. And we do have a process in place for vetting people before we allow them in. And that's hard to do when someone arrives on a raft with no paperwork, and you can't just call up the Syrian government and ask them, is so-and-so a terrorist? It's just not that easy like it's been in the past. But we'll have to work our way through it. I also think we should do more to help our allies in Europe with the costs of admitting these people. But ultimately, the way to end this crisis is to bring stability back to that region through a comprehensive plan to destroy ISIS. And I've outlined what that plan looks like. It involves some initial special operations forces to target, capture, and humiliate ISIS leaders and publicize it in the world so that fighters are discouraged from joining them. But ultimately, you're going to need a combined Sunni army of Egyptians, Jordanians, Saudis, and others with our air support on the ground to defeat ISIS militarily.
But that will all take time. For the short term, I get what you're laying out there, but for the short term, we're just going to keep seeing this video. There will be people who won't make it.
Right. It's terrible tragedy. And
is there truly nothing we can either nationally or internationally do to help that transitional period?
Well, part of it is, can we establish safe havens within the Middle East where some of these refugees can go to? And there's been work to try to do that. The administration hasn't moved strong enough on it. But there are regions bordering Turkey and Syria, for example, where if you were to commit assets combined with the ground assets to carve out a safe space where people can go to, it would create a release valve for some of this dangerous journeys that people are undertaking. But here's my point. We have to begin to lay the groundwork now, because it won't be 4 million, it'll be 12 million if this continues. So we've got to have a long-term strategy and one for the short-term issue. And I think the short-term issue is a combination of helping our allies with the people that are coming, accepting our fair share of that as well, and also helping to establish safe havens in the region where people can flee to and be safe from ISIS or Assad or whoever it is that's making their life a living hell.
Have you had to talk to your kids about this? Do they see any of this video?
They do see it, and they're disturbed by it. Certainly my daughters are old enough now to see what it all means, and explaining to them, I think it's really illustrative of a broader point, and that is that there was once a thought process not long ago that it was growing in my party, towards isolationism, the belief that America could ignore things happening around the world and we should be focused on nation building at home. In fact, it's a thought process the president himself has had. He argued in those very terms that it was time to come home and focus on our problems here and ignore what's happening in the Middle East. This is an example of why you can't. Instability anywhere in the world, particularly in the Middle East, will ultimately impact us. Today it's impacting our NATO allies. It will eventually impact America.